There was once a woman so powerful that kings feared even speaking her name. Her kingdom overflowed with gold, wealth, and unimaginable luxury. Her army stretched beyond the horizon. Thousands bowed before her throne every single day. Yet every morning, this queen would walk out beneath the open sky, lift her eyes to the heavens, and bow down to the sun. Her name was Balqis, the Queen of Sheba. But what if I told you this story did not begin with a queen, a throne, or a kingdom? It began with a bird, a tiny hoopoe bird carrying a secret that would change the course of history forever. One message, one prophet, one queen blinded by power and pride. And then everything changed. Because hidden inside this story is one of the most extraordinary journeys ever revealed in the Quran. A journey filled with mystery, miracles, powerful kingdoms, supernatural events, and a truth so overwhelming that it shattered the heart of a queen who once worshipped the sun itself. What was written in the letter that made a mighty queen tremble? What did she witness that destroyed her arrogance in a single moment? And how did one of the most powerful women on earth fall into submission before the Lord of all creation? Tonight, you are about to witness the breathtaking story of Balqis, the woman who walked from darkness into divine guidance, and whose story still leaves millions speechless centuries later. Welcome to Divine Sagas. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will change the way you think about faith, power, and what it truly means to be guided.
We begin not in a palace, not in a desert, not in the throne room of the most powerful prophet king who ever lived. We begin in the air, in the sky, with a bird flying alone across a sea of golden sand, following something it couldn't explain, a feeling, a pull, a certainty that something important was waiting at the end of the horizon. The Hudhud bird, the Hudhud, was no ordinary creature. In the army of Prophet Sulaiman, peace be upon him, the Hudhud served as an intelligence scout. And what an army it was. No army in all human history has ever looked like this one. Sulaiman, the prophet to whom Allah had given dominion over humans, jinn, animals, and even the wind itself, commanded a force unlike anything the world had seen before or since. Rows of human soldiers, trained and disciplined. Behind them, invisible but terrifyingly real, battalions of jinn warriors who could move faster than the human eye could follow. And among the birds, entire squadrons of hawks, falcons, and eagles, each one assigned a specific role in the intelligence network of the Prophet's kingdom. The Hudhud was part of this network. Its job was to fly far, observe silently, and return with information. But on this particular day, when Prophet Sulaiman called his army to formation for inspection, the Hudhud was nowhere to be found. The birds began to whisper amongst themselves nervously. The animals shifted uneasily. Everyone knew what it meant to be absent without permission from a prophet of Allah. This was not a moment anyone wanted to witness. But when Sulaiman arrived and noticed the gap in formation, that empty space where the Hudhud should have been, his expression changed. The Quran tells us, he said,
"Unless the Hudhud presents a clear reason for his absence, I shall indeed punish him with a severe torment."
The weight of those words settled like thunder over the entire assembled army. But the Hudhud was already on its way, because what it had seen had shaken it to its core. The Hudhud had traveled far, farther than any bird in that army had ever been sent. It had found itself over the land of Saba, a kingdom in southern Arabia that was said to stretch from the Arabian Peninsula all the way across to parts of eastern Africa. It had flown over roads and markets and enormous estates, and then it had seen something that stopped its wings mid-air, a ceremony. Thousands of people gathered together in formation, soldiers, priests, advisors, ordinary citizens, all bowing, all facing the same direction. The Hudhud circled lower, confused. Were they praying to Allah? Were they in submission to their creator?
But no, as it descended further, it realized the horrifying truth. Every single person, from the lowest servant to the woman seated on the most magnificent throne it had ever seen, they were all bowing to the sun, prostrating themselves before a ball of fire in the sky. And the woman on that throne, her beauty was breathtaking, her crown gleaming, her posture commanding. She was the queen, and she was bowing.
The Hudhud felt something rupture inside its chest. How? How could people with this level of civilization, this level of intelligence, this level of achievement, how could they be so deeply lost? It thought of its prophet. It thought of Sulaiman's teachings about Tawheed, about the oneness of Allah, and in that moment, the little bird made a decision that would alter the course of history. It turned around and flew back as fast as its wings could carry it. When the Hudhud arrived before Sulaiman, trembling, its head lowered, it didn't make excuses. It didn't try to minimize what it had done. It came forward with the truth. It said, "Oh, my master, I have seen something you do not yet know. I have come from the land of Saba, where a woman rules her people from a magnificent throne. She has been given everything: wealth, power, status, intelligence, and yet she and all her people prostrate to the sun. Shaitan has adorned their deeds for them and turned them away from the truth." These words from a small bird landed in the heart of a prophet like arrows. Sulaiman did not react with anger. He did not react with contempt. Instead, he grew quiet. And then he made a decision that revealed the difference between a ruler who seeks conquest and a prophet who seeks guidance for humanity. He said,
We will soon see if your excuse is true, or if you are among the liars. Do not test the patience of this court.
He called for ink and parchment. He composed a letter, brief, powerful, clear. It began with the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. It invited the queen and her people to abandon arrogance and submit to the truth. No threats, no elaborate political language, just an invitation, direct, dignified, and unmistakable. He sealed the letter and handed it to the Hudhud. "Go," he said, "deliver this. Then wait, watch how they respond." Now here is where this story becomes something truly remarkable. The Hudhud carried that letter across the desert, over mountains and valleys, until it reached the palace of Queen Balqis. And what it did next, what this small, divinely guided bird chose to do, tells us something profound about how truth sometimes arrives in our lives. Not with fanfare, not with armies marching through the gate, but quietly, unexpectedly, while we are still asleep. The Hudhud found the queen's chamber. It found an open window high above the palace grounds, and it slipped inside. It hid in the rafters above her bed, watching her sleep. And as it looked at this woman, so beautiful, so powerful, so deeply misguided, it felt something that went beyond the mission it had been given. It felt sadness. The kind of sadness that comes when you watch someone standing right next to a door they can't see.
It waited. And when the moment came, the letter fell from its beak and landed on her bed. Queen Balqis woke up to find a sealed letter lying beside her. She looked around. No one. She called for her guards. They swore on their lives that no one had entered or exited the chamber. She held that letter in her hands, and we can only imagine what she felt in that moment. A letter appearing on her bed from a king she had heard stories about, delivered by a method that defied all explanation. She broke the seal. She read. The Quran preserves her exact words when she addressed her council. She said, "O my noble advisors, a very distinguished letter has been delivered to me. It is from Sulaiman. It begins with the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. And it commands us not to act in arrogance, but to come to him in full submission." Look at how she read it. She didn't immediately dismiss it. She didn't perform outrage for the benefit of her court. She read it carefully. She noted that it began with the name of Allah. She noted the tone, not a declaration of war, but an invitation. And then she asked her council, "What is your counsel? I do not decide any matter until I have heard from you." Now, her counsel was typical of how power responds to truth. Most of them immediately reached for the language of strength. "We are powerful," they said. "We have armies, we have weapons, we will fight." But Balqis, and this is why her story endures, Balqis was wiser than her advisors. She said, "When kings enter a city by force, they destroy it. They humiliate those who were once honored. This is not something I will invite upon my people without first understanding what we are truly facing." She made a decision. She would send a gift, a magnificent, overwhelming gift, one that would test Sulaiman's intentions. If he was merely hungry for wealth and tribute, the gift would satisfy him and buy her people peace. But if he refused it, if a man with armies beyond imagination returned a golden tray filled with priceless jewels, then she would know that she was dealing with something entirely different from any king she had ever encountered before. The artisans of Saba worked through the night. They poured gold and gemstones and all the finest craftsmanship their kingdom could produce into a gift that was meant to overwhelm. The golden tray alone was worth the ransom of a small nation. And with this gift, Queen Balqis sent her most trusted messengers and a military officer with secret orders to assess Sulaiman's army, his weapons, his defenses. She needed to know what she was truly facing.
What those messengers found shattered every assumption they had carried with them. Before they even reached Suleiman's palace, they encountered the outer edges of his forces, and what they saw made grown men stumble in disbelief. Humans and jinn fighting side by side, lions leading battalions of animals, the wind itself moving like a soldier under orders, weapons that moved without human hands guiding them. And when a calm officer told them, without even raising his voice, that this is merely a portion of the jinn forces doing their morning exercises, the messengers looked at each other and felt something collapse inside them. Whatever they had brought with them, whatever confidence they had packed alongside those golden gifts, was gone. They were received with dignity, they were fed and honored, and then the gifts were brought forward and returned. Suleiman sent back every piece of gold, every gem, every carefully crafted treasure, along with a message that struck the messengers like lightning. Do you think to impress me with wealth? What Allah has granted me is far greater than anything you could offer. Take your gifts back, and know this: if you choose not to come to me willingly, I will come to you with a force that will uproot the very foundations of your kingdom. That message reached Balqis in the quiet hours of the night. And when she heard it, when she understood that a man had looked at unimaginable wealth and turned it away, that he had mentioned Allah, that his power was not built on politics or inheritance, but on something divine, something shifted inside her. The certainty she had always carried about her own greatness began to crack. She made a decision that required more courage than any battlefield could demand. She, the Queen of Saba, would travel herself, not send messengers, not hide behind protocol. She, the Queen of Saba, would travel to the court of Prophet Sulaiman and face this truth with her own eyes. While the Queen was preparing for her journey, events were already unfolding in Sulaiman's court that she could not have imagined. The Prophet gathered his council, ministers, scholars, commanders, and asked a question that seemed impossible. The Queen is coming, but before she arrives, who among you can bring her throne to me?
A powerful jinn stood forward and said, "I can bring it to you before you even rise from your seat." But then a scholar, a man who had been given special knowledge directly from Allah, a knowledge known in Islamic tradition as Ilm al-Ladun, spoke with calm certainty. He said, "I can bring it to you before your eyes can blink. And in the time it takes to draw a single breath, The throne of Queen Balqis, that enormous, jeweled, magnificent throne from a palace hundreds of miles away, appeared before Prophet Sulaiman as if it had always been there. Think about that for a moment. Not because it was magic, not because it was a trick, but because it was a sign, a demonstration of what genuine nearness to Allah, genuine knowledge rooted in divine guidance is capable of. Sulaiman looked at that throne and immediately gave thanks to Allah, not to himself, not to the scholar, not to his kingdom. He said, "This is from the grace of my Lord, to test whether I will be grateful or ungrateful." Gratitude in the middle of a miracle. That was the character of a prophet. But Sulaiman wasn't finished. He ordered the throne to be altered, certain symbols changed, certain decorations rearranged, so that it would be recognizable but subtly different. And beneath it, hidden but unmistakable to anyone who looked, he placed a message. "We are among those who have submitted to Allah." Now the queen arrived, and nothing she had prepared herself for had prepared her for this. The palace that Sulaiman had built was unlike anything in the known world, not because of its gold or its towers or its scale, though all of those were extraordinary. It was the floor. The entrance floor of the palace was made of pure transparent glass, polished until it was invisible, and beneath it, crystal clear water flowed. Fish and light danced below the surface in a way that made it appear as though you were walking on a shallow pool. Queen Balqis approached the entrance. She had walked through palaces before. She had commanded rooms full of powerful men, but she had never seen anything like this. She thought she was about to step into water, and without thinking, instinctively, she reached down and lifted the hem of her robe. She stepped forward carefully, trying to avoid getting wet. And in that small, unguarded, deeply human moment, she revealed something about herself. She was not supernatural. She was not untouchable. She was a human being, confused by an illusion, reaching down to protect herself from something she didn't understand. Some traditional narrations suggest that Sulaiman had designed this floor partly as a test, not out of cruelty or humiliation, but because stories had reached him suggesting Balqis might not be entirely human. The jinn were known to spread such rumors, and there were whispers that she carried some jinn nature in her bloodline. Sulaiman, who knew the jinn better than any human alive, needed to see for himself. And what he saw, completely normal, completely human, set that question to rest permanently. But the glass floor was also something more. It was a metaphor. It was the moment when Balqis came face to face with an illusion and realized she had been deceived by it. Because hadn't her whole life been exactly this? Hadn't she and her entire people been walking towards something that looked like light, something that looked like truth, something worth bowing before? And hadn't they been deceived? The sun they worshipped was beautiful. It was powerful. It gave warmth and light and life. But it was a creation, not the creator. It was glass over water, impressive, dazzling, but ultimately not what it appeared to be. Sulaiman gently corrected her. The floor is made of glass. She composed herself, and then he showed her the throne. She stared at it. It was her throne. She recognized every line, every gem, every detail, and yet something was different. She said, cautiously, "It looks as though it is mine." She was being honest. She wasn't pretending. She was processing something that defied everything she thought she understood about the world. Her throne, which had been in her palace when she left, was sitting in front of her in a kingdom hundreds of miles away. How was that possible? What kind of power was this? Sulaiman sat beside her and they spoke. Not as conqueror and captive, not as powerful and weak, but as two people sitting with the weight of truth between them. He spoke about Allah. He spoke about the sun, that the sun itself was a creation placed in the sky to serve humanity, the way flowers serve bees and rain serves soil. He said, for a human being made in a form of honor and given the capacity for reason and knowledge to bow before another creation, that is not devotion. That is a humiliation of everything you were given. And something happened in Queen Balqis that no army could have forced, something that no threat could have extracted, something that no amount of political pressure or military superiority could have produced. Her heart broke open, not in grief, in recognition. The way a person feels when they hear a truth they somehow always knew, but had never been told clearly. The way a locked room feels when someone finally finds the right key. She stood up, and she declared in words that have echoed through centuries that she had been wronging herself, that she submitted to Allah, Lord of all the worlds, alongside Prophet Sulaiman.
She became Muslim, not because she had to, not because she had no choice, but because when truth stood in front of her, stripped of all illusion, she had the courage to recognize it, and her people followed. This is the part of the story that most people don't sit with long enough. Not the glass floor, not the teleported throne, not the invisible army of jinn. This, a woman who had everything: power, wealth, adoration, a kingdom that stretched across the horizon, chose to let go of all of it the moment she encountered something real. She chose submission over pride. She chose truth over legacy. She chose Allah over the sun. And it all began with a bird that followed a feeling. A bird that had the courage to speak the truth even while trembling. A bird that carried a letter across the desert because it believed that guidance was worth delivering, even at personal cost. There is something Allah is saying to us through this story that I want you to hold on to. Truth doesn't always arrive the way we expect it to. Sometimes it arrives through a letter we didn't ask for. Sometimes it arrives through something small and seemingly insignificant. Sometimes it arrives while we are still asleep, and it is lying there waiting when we open our eyes. The question is never how truth arrives. The question is what we do when it does. Balqis had every reason to ignore that letter. She had armies, she had advisors who told her to fight, she had a throne and a people who expected her to be strong. But she chose to listen. She chose to investigate. She chose honesty over ego. And because of that choice, made in a quiet chamber in the middle of the night, holding a letter dropped by a bird, she became one of the most beloved figures in Islamic tradition, a queen who found her way home. We all have a Hudhud in our lives, a moment, a person, a quiet voice inside us that says, wait, something is wrong. The direction you are facing is not the right one. The thing you are bowing to is not worth your prostration. The question is, are we brave enough, like Balqis, to lift our heads and look again? This story has been told for 14 centuries, and it still speaks, because the sun is still beautiful, and Shaitan is still making wrong paths look right. And somewhere in each of us, there is a queen who needs to step onto the glass floor and finally see what's really beneath her feet. May Allah guide us all to the truth before the truth has to chase us down across the desert. May He give us the honesty of the Hudhud, the wisdom of Sulaiman, and the courage of Balqis. This has been Divine Sagas. If this story reached your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes all it takes is one voice, even a small one, to change the direction of a kingdom.